Well, good afternoon or good morning, or for at least one of you, good evening. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar about making your incentive and recognition program data work for you. My name is Jeff Weiner, and I lead the analytics team at 110. And our focus today is going to be talking about using your data from your incentive and recognition programs to meet your business objectives. I'm really excited to share our experience with different analytical techniques with you today. Hopefully these techniques you'll find easy to understand, and for the most part you can start working on them later this afternoon if so inclined. Today we'll talk about a handful of topics. We really set out to give you a webinar that we would want to attend ourselves, so we'll do a quick background on 110, and I promise the word here will be quick. We'll try to spend most of our time talking about the Salesperson Future Value and how you can implement some aspects of it today through analytics. And we'll ideally do that by sharing some very specific examples. At 110, we simply believe in better. Our mission is everything we do is to help you achieve the maximum results and the maximum potential on behalf of our clients. That really applies to whether it's an incentive and recognition program, our focus today, or an implementation of our Performex platform, our rewards offerings that go with it, one of our travel or events offerings, or any of the marketing services that can either be a standalone or integrated with other services. If you haven't already done so yet, I encourage you to check out our website where we have a lot more detail on our services and some really great case studies that illustrate how we believe in better. Now, on to the heart of the matter today. Most of the CEOs that I talk to tell me that there's three things that keep them up at night. The first is getting and keeping top talent in a time where there's record low unemployment. The second is gaining a competitive edge either through delivery, branding, product, or some combination thereof. And the last is driving sales performance to demonstrate continued sustainable growth for their shareholders. So how does an incentive and recognition program help you solve these challenges? Well, for your sales channel, different programs such as perhaps a learn and earn or a certification program can help your dealer sales reps understand your products, and an appropriate incentive effort focused on the right products at the right time can help you gain their mind share when they're in front of their clients. Your internal sales team probably has similar goals, but there are some nuances in that your team not only needs to understand your products, but also needs to understand your internal processes and have the tools to achieve those goals and objectives. And then finally, for your employees, most of them want to work in a culture that supports them with a manager that understands their goals and encourages them when they meet their challenges and really can help them along their career path. So these are definitely some huge challenges. So where do we begin? Well, all too often the answer is probably sitting in the data that's tied to our incentive and recognition programs. A study in December by the IRF just showed that there's only 26% of you out there who are doing anything more than basic reporting on your incentive program and recognition data. And the question that comes to my mind is how can we gain the insight from those programs that you need to help you achieve your business objectives? And so to do that, I want to introduce a framework that will help you think about that as it relates to recognition and incentive. So let's start with an illustrative example here on the screen. Here's a book of business that maybe one of your salespeople has. 3 key accounts, one more valuable than the other 2, and one on the left here has multiple buyers. Now, we hit the end of the year, and oh no, the salesperson didn't achieve their number for the year. So maybe buyer 1 had her budget cut and should have been $2 signs, but this year it finished with only $1 sign. So what happens? Well, if you're like a lot of clients, you might say you might need some training. And this is what we hear a lot. But what are we actually doing in this case? Well, we're training our sales teams after the fact when the actual need for training has already passed. What if we train them before they needed the training to close a deal that hinged on very specific knowledge? What if we could use all of that data that we have in our incentive and recognition program to better understand both our customers and our sales teams and develop the right strategy to engage all of these audiences at the right time? This is really something that could help us all sleep better at night. We think what that is this notion of salesperson future value. So looking at the salesperson's future sales and managing against those future sales, instead of looking out the rear window, first appeared in a paper in the Journal of Marketing Research back in 2014. So instead of looking backwards, what if we could use our data to predict which customers were going to buy what products when, and then make sure that our salespeople were equipped to maximize the outcome of those sales? Well, the original paper focused on incentives and training. At 110, we've expanded that to include incentives and training, but also communications and even analytics as a means of helping your sales teams assure that every dollar of that predicted sale is captured. This is what Salesperson Future Value really shines and what it does best. So in the time we have left, what we'd like to explore is each of these drivers that you see across the top here. Within each of these areas, we'd like to show you how some simple analytical techniques can help you understand what's working, what's not, how you can get the most from your sales and incentive recognition program, how you can use that data to really inform what the Salesperson Future Value Framework looks for you and your organization. So, very simple example we'll start with here to show the impact of a recognition program from the manager's perspective. So one might argue that employees are really the focus of a recognition program, but managers have an important role to play as well, and that's often overlooked. Their program participation is really important. On this slide, we show the key metric of sales goal achievement. So how much did you deliver relative to your sales goal? And we look at them for a few different slices of our manager population. The analytical approach is really to look at these different segments of managers and then examine key measures within those segments. So very simple. There's a few different ways to look at what is a successful manager in a recognition program. One of the easiest is how often do they award their team members? And based on our work, we've seen that those who award their teams at least 5 out of 12 months, they generally have higher participation rates and better results than those who reward their team in less than 5 months out of a rolling 12. So here you see it's the difference between those two groups is a 0.6% difference. So that looks small, but in this case, it actually translated to millions of dollars for our client. Another way to look at that is how long have managers been active in the program? And in our experience, managers who have 5 or more years of experience with the program tend to have teams that perform at a have better results. So again, once again, this difference looks really small here, but again, millions of dollars. And then finally, here's where you start to see a huge difference. This is when we sort all of the managers by the number of awards that they issue, and we put them into deciles or 10% groups. So when you compare the top 10% versus the bottom 10%, you can see a huge difference here. And this actually translates into almost $100 million. So it's really this type of metric that can show how the impact of recognition in your business when you have a highly engaged management team. So managers are great in everything, but what about from the employee perspective? Well, so here's an example of a recognition program. And what we did is, this is in a call center example, and we look at cohorts of employees, so groups of employees who started around the same time. And we use a technique called survival analysis, which is a fancy way to say that each month we just calculate how many employees are remaining at the end of each month, and we look at that as a percentage. So we've split this group into, we split these employees, this cohort, into 3 different groups. The first group we'll call the highly recognized, and that they received a lot of recognitions right out of the gate, getting recognitions almost every month. We'll call the middle group the some recognition group, so they've generally received some recognition, but they're not in the bottom group, which we'll call the unrecognized. Now, along the x-axis here, you can see that these are the number of months from the time that this group was hired. So what happens over time? First thing you can see is that at 2 years, 99% of the heavily recognized group remain. Now, the first thing that you probably comes to mind is that, yes, there's probably some natural selection here. So your better employees right out of the gate are probably being heavily recognized. And we can definitely see that these better employees are receiving the most recognitions and they're staying the longest. 99% of them remain at 2 years in. Similarly, here's the impact of some recognition. So 86% of that group is still here after 2 years. And then finally, in the unrecognized group, again, we probably have our worst performing employees from the start in this group. And in fact, we've lost over 28% of them after 2 years. So think about this from a cost perspective. The hiring of these folks, the recruiting efforts, the training, the ramp up to full productivity, this is a huge cost in these lower 2 groups that we're incurring. Now, some of you, when you look at this graph, the first thing that probably your attention is drawn to is what happened at month 93. Well, there was a big corporate restructuring. So our client laid off, cut a number of costs across the organization and laid off a number of employees. And a lot of people lost their jobs. Now, the interesting thing to see is that the highly recognized group, so those top performers, they really started to leave 12 months before this restructuring. So maybe they saw the writing on the wall. Maybe they were involved in, they had a broader scope of management and they could understand what was coming. But they really started to leave around month 81 at a much higher rate than everybody else. So after the restructuring, what you see here is really probably the least desirable outcome of a corporate restructuring, is that the worst employees or the least recognized employees are really the ones who remain at the highest rates. And so here's a case where it was really, the management team at this organization really could have leveraged their recognition program data and helped to identify who they should keep and who they should let go in this restructuring, but in fact they didn't. And so as a result, they lost most of their top performers and they ended up keeping a disproportionate number of their worst performers. Still thinking about those drivers of salesperson future value, we've made it over to the third box, which is training. So this is a quick but powerful example. We're responsible for helping a client in the automotive industry with training of their dealer sales reps. One of the questions they had for us was, they have a certification program where their dealer sales reps go through and complete a program and a series of training courses, and they become a certified dealer sales rep. Now they're eligible for incremental bonuses, and so there's some costs associated with this, and certainly taking them off of the selling floor to complete the training has some costs as well. So the question they had was, does my certification program have any impact on sales? And the short answer is yes. And in fact, we can see that the dealer sales reps who are certified sell 2.3 times the number of vehicles than non-certified reps do. Analytically, this is super easy to calculate, right? Find the average sales of the certified reps and divide by the average of the other reps. And what you'll get here is usually some multiplier that shows you that yes, my certification program pays off, and it also delivers a superior customer experience. Now, let's talk briefly about communications. When you talk about an incentive and recognition program, this is also often overlooked, but it really is an integral part of the examples I've just shared with you, and the one that I'll share with you next. The idea here is that you can quickly start to leverage the data in your incentive and recognition program to segment either your dealers, your customers, really your sales team, really any group of interest. And in our favorite approach here is to put these participants into a portfolio approach where we're looking at a combination of the relative value they bring to your organization and some type of needs that they have. So perhaps it's some people crave competition, or some people are looking for strictly cash incentives, or other people are really looking for non-monetary incentives. Perhaps it's as simple as that. On the vertical axis, we have the value group where we have our most valuable, either salespeople, customers, channel partners. We have the group in the middle, which is probably the most growable based on their predicted future revenue. And then we have a group called the migrators. So these folks are always coming and going because of where they're at. The value to them is, the value to us as an organization is somewhat limited, but we need to keep track of those. So when we look at these two factors together, we can end up with what you see here. So in this case, I have three very distinct groups that I can now communicate with that have very different needs and very different value to my organization. So by having these different communication approaches, I can really be much more relevant and maximize the likelihood of a behavior change and the value of that behavior, especially when it comes to capturing the future value from these program participants. Now, our last example, I'd like to share a case of really how analytics itself can help influence salesperson future value. And one of my personal favorites is the next best product to sell. So the idea here is, again, to leverage your sales data in your sales incentive program and determine which combinations of products sell best together. Now, this is a little bit more complicated to calculate and to explain in the time that we have left today. So I'm only presenting a really simplified view of it. But if you do a search online, you'll find some calculators that you can use and a whole lot more detail. But the basic idea is to really get down to this column of lift. And the lift is how frequently each product is sold together, and then how frequently the products are sold in combination. And what this gives us is for each time somebody sells a product related to the Hunger Games, they're 2.95 times as likely to buy a product in the agency category. So this is a great way to cross-sell and grow sales. And in fact, we have a number of clients that leverage this type of approach relative to other external factors in the communications framework I previously presented to really drive and grow sales. So today we had, again, talked about the Salesperson Future Value and introduced that, and hopefully that resonated with you, that forward-looking view of how to capture future sales and maximize the efforts. We talked about the role of analytics by sharing 4 of our favorite examples, and we did so with an eye on each of the drivers of the Salesperson Future Value. So I'd like to thank you for attending and have you think about how we can help you. If there's something we can do for you, please email us at info@110marketing.com. And if you haven't already, visit us at our website, www.110marketing.com, or on social media at 110 Inc. Yeah. If you have any questions right now, we'd love to take those. Go ahead and type those in the chat, and my handy organizer here will let me know what comes up.
That just came up. Does this approach work for any business industry?
First question we got is, does this approach work for any business or industry? And the answer is, to a certain extent, yes. So we have a number of different clients who are leveraging different portions of this today. Not all of them are going to be directly applicable to all industries. And the way that some businesses are structured, not every aspect of this is going to be relevant. But in general, if you have sales team, you have a channel partners, or you have employees that are out talking to customers and we're trying to capture sales, then yes, this is relevant to you.
The question is, what data points do you need from your incentive and recognition program in order to leverage this methodology?
Yeah, so the question that came in is, what data do you need to leverage this methodology? The answer is really simple. You can actually start with any type of sales transaction data. So all we need to be able to predict future value of a customer is their historical purchases. And once we have that, we can really get going and establish a framework. So by establishing the predicted future value of each customer and summarizing that up to each salesperson or channel partner, that really gives you the opportunity to look at what's important to them and how to best motivate them.
How long has 110 been providing analytics services?
So the last question we have in queue currently is, how long has 110 been providing analytics services? And dare I say that when I interviewed for a position in our group in one of our previous incarnations back in 1992, when I was in grad school, we had an analytics team providing these services then. So it's been well over 30 years that we've been providing analytics to our sales incentive and recognition program customers.
What's the best way for me to get in touch with 110?
Yeah. So the last question is, what's the best way to get in touch with 110? And I'll take you back to this slide where you can really email us at info@110marketing, explain who you are, who your organization is, and what your most pressing problem is, or what you're hoping to achieve. Your measurable business objective is the language we like to use here. If you shoot that in, one of our handy marketing team will be sure to distribute that to someone who can call you straight away. Yeah, or you can visit our website and there's a form you can fill out there as well. So any other questions today? Okay, no more questions. Like we promised, we'd keep this short and sweet today. You'll be getting a recording of this in the upcoming days here. And then if any other questions come in via email later on, we will submit those back out to the group. Thank you so much for joining us today, and enjoy the rest of your day.